top because I've got a workshop voice and I don't normally need to do that because I could talk quite loudly, so this is a bit weird. And it's all very formal, and we've got the back of the bus people that have hidden themselves, so please do get involved with questions at the end. As you know, we've invited, and I can see some first years, but also second years and third years to come in today and to hear from some. We're really lucky to have a group of alumni, people that were with us on the course over various years. We were just working that out. Who are going to be able to talk directly about their experience, and hopefully, after the questions that you've been looking at, the answers you're going to give some kind of key points that I hope, one way or another, is going to be very useful to you in terms of your experience on the course now, but also what's going to happen to you when you've left. So, just a few things before we start. If you've got mobile phones, please put them on silent. Obviously, if you need to use them for dictation or some other kind of access arrangement, then that's absolutely fine, but otherwise we'll keep that to a minimum. The plan really is that we've got about 2 hours. We're going to open up and talk to the panel, and we're going to get some questions going and get them talking about their experience. And I know I've spoken to you guys already, and they've got quite a lot of information to relate to you. And we're then going to move on and work towards a point where you can start to ask some questions. And hopefully at the end there'll be enough time for us to have a bit more of an informal moment where you can talk amongst yourselves, meet our panel, and there could be key aspects of your practice and things that you're doing that really connect with you and what your outlook is. So that'd be a great point in which you can get in touch and talk directly with the panel that we have. So that's the kind of the plan of how things are going to go. What I'll do first of all then is just let you know who we've got. So directly in front of us at the moment, we've got a range of years in terms of when you guys all graduated. But Karen on this side has been working and living as an artist for quite some time. Graduated in 2004, so we think, yeah, which is a while ago. So it's got a range of experiences that comes from that. We've got Konstantinos. You've all sat in order of years. It's quite interesting. So yeah, 2020. So one of our graduates and has since left and is working as an artist, completed your MA at the RCA. And then we've got Fola. Fola completed her degree in 2021 and is now working in the TV and moving image industry. You did an MA as well, graduated from that not so long ago.
Yeah, 2022.
2022, yeah. And then we've got Carolina, who's probably the most recent, and is the most recent, 2023, so only just a year ago, but is already working with a gallery, set up a curating, we call it a team, or a group of colleagues, and then you're looking as a curator and an artist to be out there and working as well. So Carolina's going to have some interesting kind of processes to talk about, particularly as you're the most recent and probably relate really directly to where the Virgin is going to be in a matter of months really, as we talk about things. So that's the plan. So what I'm hoping we can do is, if we can go through, and I'll just remind everybody, this is Karen, this is Konstantinos, this is Fola, and this is Carolina. Be really great, and Fola's got the mic in hand at the moment, just to give a little introduction about who you are and anything that you want to tell us about, briefly about your journey.
Okay, yeah, sure. So I'm Fola Francescini. As you know, I studied fine art mixed media in my undergrad, and then straight afterwards I went into a postgrad called Digital Media Moving Image. This is at Goldsmiths, and during my time I primarily focused on animation. I also was on a bursary scheme for my master's degree, so I was also working with the Stations Foundation. And if you don't know what it is, it's basically a guild that specialized in the content and communication industries. So they were basically supporting me during that postgraduate in finding basically support after my studies. So after postgraduate, I did kind of struggle after basically trying to find what I was wanting to do in terms of animation. And the Stations Foundation kind of supported me that way through basically film production. So I was the film production assistant for a year with them as they were filming educational videos because they supported students like me. I also went through Film London and I went through their animation scheme. I did an independent film on the topic of AI. And through that, I was able to make a connection and find the job that I currently have now as a development assistant in children's and young audiences.
Amazing. Thank you. That's great. Caroline?
Hi everyone, my name is Karuna. As Ray mentioned, I graduated the Fine Arts Media BA just a year ago in 2023, so I would still consider myself a recent graduate. I'm currently doing an MA in Culture Criticism and Curation at Central St. Martin's, and I'm graduating, the course finishes in just a week, so all of that is very fresh as well. And then in terms of my professional life, I am an artist and a curator who mostly works as part of a collective of early career creatives that we sort of formed with a few of my Westminster course mates after we graduated. And yeah, we now work together, mostly under this collective, into workshops, exhibitions, and various sort of like short-term events. I can tell more about that if you're interested later on. And then alongside that, to support myself, I also work as a gallery assistant at Stolen Space Gallery. So once again, I can tell you more about that later on.
Hello there, Konstantinos. I graduated in 2020, and I was at Fine Arts Media, and basically it was a very uncertain period because it was during COVID, so it was quite challenging, but then I went straight into my MA at the RCA. I did MA painting, and after MA painting I started working as a practicing artist. I had a couple of shows, a solo show, and currently I'm balancing between my job as an artist and a teacher in 2 schools.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello everyone. It's really interesting to try and condense 20 years into 3 minutes. But I'm going to try. So I finished in 2004, and then I panicked about money and got a job in the city, and I was working there for a while. I've always worked in the city all along, everything else I do. And then I decided one day that if I went into work on that particular morning, and I remember the morning, and I remember standing there, I thought if I go into work today, I'm never going to leave the city. And so I called my partner, I can't do this anymore. And so he said, fine, because he's a painter as well. And he understood. And I started on a different journey, and I started looking to do MAs. But this was a few years in between the BA and the MA. And in between, I was working, as well as working in the city, I was working in various galleries. So I always had kind of one foot in each area. And then I did my MA, and it took about 3 years to get onto the MA, because I kept thinking, I only want to go to the Royal Academy. I was like, I'm only applying to the Royal Academy, so I've got anyone who's going to get in. But I kept applying every year, and then the final year I thought, I just need to do my MA now, and I applied everywhere, and got into Wimbledon, which I loved. Finished at Wimbledon, and then I had a few years off, and again I'm working in galleries all this time as well. And then I did a PhD, and I got a bursary for that, and that was in 2018, and I finished that this year. And I got into Bloomberg New Contemporaries this year as well, and I have various shows on at the moment, so it's, that's my 20 years in 3 minutes.
Amazing. we're going to have to go into detail now. Can't really get away 3 minutes and 20 years. I'm going to leave that there because that's going to pass on. While I remember, when I said we can ask some questions, it's quite handy that we've got these pads in front of you. You can use it if anything comes up that kind of catches your attention, just to come up with a question. You can also use that QR code if you want to do an anonymous question, and Hayden can pick that up, and then we'll feed that back in when we get to that. I forgot to let you know that. So thank you for incredibly concise talk about where you'd come from, but actually it was quite clear. You've all got very different kind of perspectives, outlooks, and I think in a way that's going to be interesting now as we get into some of the questions that we've got, to see how that crosses over, and hopefully some of that diversity of experience will chime with all of you individually. So, thinking about being at Westminster, this is kind of quite a difficult question really, because it impacts directly on us and how we were with you. But the first question that we were looking at was how Westminster's helped you to figure out your career path, and what would you do differently if you had the time again? I think that's kind of interesting, because it might be that some of you want to talk about the fact, no, there wasn't much of a preparation, or yes, there was, but I would like to do something differently. So it'd be interesting to hear from all of you from that perspective. I don't know who would like to start with that question. Yeah, go on, Karen.
I'm pretty sure it was this university with Shez working here, which is okay.
Yeah.
Shez Darwood, when I was here, he was doing professional practice, and he got us all to try and get in touch with some galleries and get jobs, and it was brilliant actually. So I wouldn't do anything different, but I thought that was really excellent. I wrote 100 letters, not emails, letters. Like I typed them, I printed them and sent them. And out of 100, I got 10 replies. And out of those 10 replies, I got 3 galleries that said, come and do some interning with us. So I thought that was excellent, and that 100 to 10 to 3 is something that has continued, actually. It's a really good key.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I wouldn't change anything. I thought it was brilliant.
Great, thank you.
So basically, when I was the years that I spent at mixed media, what I think helped me figure out my path is mostly experimentation, which I was free to do, and it was, I think, the stepping stone for developing my practice. Developing the practice is, I think, it was the most important component, and also through the different modules that you have and I had, it helped me see how does how do jobs work, galleries, and I had an understanding of what I like, what I don't, and mostly it's basically that. It's experimenting and working and getting feedback and working again. And if I had to, I wouldn't really change anything. I don't think that I would do anything differently, really.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would say for me it was really about how rigid I was in like the first year. I was very stuck on traditional art. I don't know if anyone else has this, but when you come out of, for example, sixth form, they kind of give you an idea of what meets the criteria to get the grade, and that was very much how I was at the beginning. So I didn't really kind of go out until, the lecturers here, like Henry and Peggy were like, you need to be open, you need to really kind of find what suits you. And it was through that I was very much interested in digital animation and just digital art in general. I was also very interested in fan art, so I would draw that on the side. And through that, I was like, I think it was second year that I was like, I want to do animation. So I would say Westminster definitely helped me kind of loosen up when it came to like stop worrying about meeting grades and a specific criterion kind of opened me up to more doors that way.
Thanks.
Actually, I'd say that my answer would be very similar to what you guys just mentioned as well. I sort of came onto the course knowing that I want to work in the arts and with art, but I wasn't really sure what would that look like. And so what I was looking for in a BA was this sort of like an environment where I could experiment with that and see what I could make of it. And that's why Fine Arts Mixed Media, in contrast to many other fine art programs, was, I think, an ideal environment for that, just because of that extra step of mixed media, this extra step of broadness. It really helped me to just, take those 3 years to just do all kinds of things that I wanted to do, experiment with a variety of different medias. And that included in some ways curating as well, and I curated some of my first shows with my course mates at Westminster, and so it definitely was a big part of my journey to where I am now, even though I sort of moved away from producing art per se, at least in this very moment of time. But yeah, I wouldn't change anything. And I'm really grateful for how it all panned out.
I mean, it's interesting for me to hear this idea of freedom in terms of how you study, what you do. I think Karen sort of, and we'll probably get to this because Folly, you were going to talk about this as well, this idea of getting a placement or an internship as a kind of a direct route into thinking about what you're doing. But the thing that comes up with the freedom that I've kind of picked up from everybody really, and Konstantinos started that process of talking about it, was this idea of knowing your own mind a bit more. Like, this is what I want. I'm making this decision, not the career advisor or and it strikes me, Follow, when you talk about, you're working with that digital animation, I think it was the eyes in the degree show,
Yes.
that piece, and the level of intrigue and kind of study and research that you put into that was all yours. And that information obviously then took you into another path. So I think that's really interesting that all of you found something for yourself through the course, which has then led to the decisions you've made, which is kind of what we hope the course will do. So that's quite good to hear from that perspective.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, with the digital video, with the video I did on eyes and omatophobia, it kind of led me into digital surveillance, and that carried on to my MA all the way till now. I'm still looking at things like AI and how these kind of translate from what it was like when I was in university to now. I mean, the advancement on AI has been so drastic during my time in university to now. So it's, yeah. Yeah, no, that's fascinating. That's kind of come to the fore as what you were doing those last years. There's no way I could have predicted or could see that would be the direction you'd go in. So that's very much tailored to your path. The next question comes up around sort of to do with when you would get, and I wonder about this a lot actually, and I think a lot of the tutors do, as you get, particularly those of you that are in the third year, and you get to that point where you're head down, you're doing your degree show, you're thinking about the work that you're trying to produce, and then somewhere in the back of your mind there's a point, this is going to end. What's going to happen? And so there's sort of anxiety there. What do you think, can you talk a little bit about that, and then what the experience was afterwards, whether or not some of those anxieties actually came true, or whether it was just like, oh, actually it's okay, and I know where I'm going and what I'm doing. Do you want to kind of talk a little bit about that end point? And I know Konstantinos has some interesting things to say as well.
Okay. So to be fair, when I was in Fine Arts Mixed Media, I wouldn't say that I had great worries because I had a goal. I wanted to pursue M&A, but also my goal was to develop my practice as much as possible. So I didn't have the luxury to think of any worries because I was really determined. But this worry started developing when you see that you may actually stop studying and actually practice what you were studying. So what I would say to all of you is that when you get out to the world and practice painting, animation, anything really, there will be a very post-graduation shock, which is something that I would definitely advise to prepare from today, from now, because you'll be, when you get out, you'll know that the opportunities might not be many. There will be many doors that might close. You may see that you cannot go forward, but you need to, in a way, try to walk yourselves around that and maybe open a door and then be led somewhere, and then maybe it's not the right door, but this might lead you to a different one that you might like more. But not really, I wouldn't say I didn't really have that many worries at this age. The worries started later, and actually I wasn't, they were much greater than I would assume that they would be. But yeah, what do you understand?
I think Karen was, I could see you were, you had a few things to say in that period.
I to answer that question. Because I think there's two things going on here, and one of them is the anxieties we might feel in the studio about work, and the other is the anxieties we might feel about financial stability. And I don't know really how to answer the question, so I'm going to try and split them up and not talk about the studio anxieties, because I think this is more focused on financial.
I think, I mean, I think it kind of comes into both, because your aim is studio and your practice, but life gets in the way.
And I often have problems splitting them actually, which is why I'm finding it difficult to ask this question, because when I was studying and when I left, I had sort of parental pressure to get a proper job. And I've always had that, and there's a real sort of, art is not a proper job, at least in my families. So I've always had that pressure to push against. And I've never had any sort of financial backing, so it's always been just me getting a job and earning what I can so I can carry on. And I actually think those anxieties, it might be controversial, but they never go. I think actually they just carry on and just learn to live with them. And just try and make money however you can, and just don't ever stop making work. Yeah, I'm struggling to put it into words, but I think all artists go through this same anxiety unless they have some kind of financial backing. So you always have to juggle a job with the studio. And one thing I did find was if you surround yourself with other artists, it's much easier. So if you surround yourself with people who are more into the other type of lifestyle, I suppose, you're always pushing against them. So just surround yourself with people who are doing the same thing as you, and it will become easier.
That's good. Thank you.
Yeah, what you said, completely agree. When I as you know, I did a master's, so I went straight into a degree because my parents were like, you should go straight into the next thing. So I didn't really have time to kind of think about it. I was, going straight into a postgraduate, and then I came out and it really hit me, and I was like, wow, this is hard. But I knew exactly what I wanted, and that's, when it comes to financial stability, that is definitely what I wanted. And I know a lot of you may want to be freelance, but it's one of those things where having, if need be, having a job that gets you by and then working on your craft on the side, if that's something you need to do, then absolutely do it. Because that's exactly what I did. I went into teaching, was a teaching assistant, but at the same time I was working on an independent film with Film London, and through that, again, made the connection and got that job. But it's really you need to kind of think about connections as well, because I was also very much in the mindset of I'm just going to animate, I'll be in my room and draw, and through that I can stay online and just keep drawing and make work that way. You need to go out and connect with people. I can't tell you how important connections are, because I applied for many jobs online, and the job I ended up getting was because I met a person face to face. So I would say really look into, just putting your work out there, having projects on the side, not just projects that is meant for your course. Always have a project that you're a passion project, because I mentioned this passion project to my boss now, and that's what kind of, was like, oh, you're very passionate about what you do, you love your craft, I want to take you on. So, yeah.
Thank you.
I think my experience will definitely echo some of the things all of you guys have mentioned as well. And I guess, yeah, the sort of end of the course panic and stress for me probably started just around the middle of the final year, with the submission of the dissertation and the preparations for the final degree show. I knew that I wanted to do an MA. My parents really wanted me to do an MA right after my studies as well, but I realized that there's no way I can manage, and that's when I decided to take a gap year. So that was in January, I think, right before we started sort of setting up for the degree show, and I felt like I was in a good place. But then I feel like that changed by the end of the year when it really hit you, when you finish the course, when you leave the studios, when you pack all of your stuff, and that's when the panic sort of hits. And that is when I sort of started to, again, I realized that what I am really setting myself up for, and that was a gap year in London. That wasn't, my parents were really against that, although I felt that it was what I needed to do. The reality of having graduated, exited a course and having to find a job now, preferably one in the industry, that was tough. But I feel like I got really lucky, because I was working in a coffee shop at the time, and what happened is that my manager at the coffee shop just said that, oh, my girlfriend works at this gallery and they're looking for a gallery assistant. Would you like to apply? And that's pretty much how I got my job. So, yeah, just a very lucky situation, I guess. But, so it all, again, panned out very nicely. But I feel like, so that gap year sort of turned into this weird thing that ended up being 3 months, but 3 months that I was working and doing other things. I did an internship during those 3 months as well, because I was so panicky about finding a job. And then the job part ended up being the easiest part of all. But yeah, I would say that was my experience of finishing the course. And then one more thing to mention, I suppose, is that once again, exiting the course and going into this world from a studio environment where you had tutors to support you and everyone was really interested in your work and everyone really wanted to talk to you about your work and hear all about it, into just just the outside world where you're technically just on your own and sort of need to push you're the only one who will push yourself to produce work. So that was really hard. And I feel like that's when that's what pushed me to sort of initiate the formation of the collective that I am a part of now, with the two Westminster course mates of mine, we sort of wanted to create a space for ourselves where we could continue producing work and continue having discussions about our work. So that was a major takeaway for me, for my experience of getting out into the real world. Just the importance of maintaining those connections and creating networks, creating, I suppose, forming communities for yourself to be a part of, because that may not always come naturally. That may not always come as a given. So yeah.
Great, thank you. The next questions we're going to be talking about the present job that you're in and how you got there, what advice you would give as opportunity, to take those opportunities. But I think we've already started to talk about that. I'm wondering if it might be worth talking a little bit more in some of the detail around that, because I know, Follow, at the beginning you were talking about doing an internship now. It's been something that was really important. I find it interesting also that, Carolina, you were talking about, you kind of said, oh, it's just luck. But actually, you did go out and get an internship at the same time. There was a level of, as Karen's talking about, of anxiety that's there that kind of drives you a bit as well. So I'm wondering about these two things. One is about like practical stuff that you think really helped. And that might be going over some of the things you've already said. But I'm also wondering about kind of the attitude shift, because we spoke as well about, you mentioned it right at the very beginning, Karen, 100 letters comes down to 3. The 3 is great, isn't it? But it's what do you do with the other 97 rejections, and how do you deal with that I think would be quite good to hear about. So yeah, I mean, it'd be great, Paula, to hear about your experience.
Yeah, I would say, just to put it out there, you have a higher chance of getting an internship while you're in education. I got an internship out of education, but it wasn't paid, and did it for 3 months. And yeah, it's just statistically you have a higher chance of getting an internship while you're in education. So I don't want to press you, but like at the same time, it's beneficial for you to look now while you're in education. I would also say that you, again, sorry, what was I saying?
Just in terms of, what benefits you, what you get out of doing that, and why now's a good time to do it, because it's, I think what you were saying earlier was that doing that afterwards becomes difficult, and what those challenges are.
Well, basically, having an internship, it benefits me because I eventually got skills in, for example, Photoshop, Team Harmony. Having these extra skills, I have more to bring, and I could also network with other people who have the same skills as me, and they're like, oh, we're looking for someone who can work with Photoshop, we're looking for someone who can do frame-by-frame animation in Tubu. I mean, these are specific to animation, and I know this is quite forward in what you guys want to do, but just having, constantly updating your skill set. I think you should at least learn one digital software as well. In the age you're currently in, it doesn't matter if you're sculpting, if you do arts like traditional. I think learning software as well is very important in our current climate.
The 100 jobs down to 3 is really interesting, and I found how things have worked for me, which sounds really tiring, but actually if it works, it works. And I guess you have to have thick skin, because there's going to be loads and loads of rejections, and some people just won't even reply. And that's fine, because some people will, and they're the ones that you gravitate towards. I think that networking, I know that it's this word that I was always really nervous of when I was studying, because what does that even mean, networking? You have to go and like chat nicely to people in a room and just be really friendly, but actually you're all networking already, you're all chatting with each other already, you just need to continue that outside of the institution really. So networking isn't something to be nervous of. I was very nervous of it. And that includes like starting to go to private years as well, which is again really intimidating. But if you could just go with like a friend to a private year and you spend like 5 or 10 minutes there, then you've broken the bubble of this nervousness of entering a private year, and it'll become really easy next time. And you never know who you talk to in these places. So private years are really good places to just go and chat to people, just talk about work and see what happens. Loads of my jobs have come about through talking to people, actually. And when I make applications, I usually don't get anywhere with them. It's usually when I kind of, it's usually through someone that I have known, and they know how I work, and know me as a person, and I've managed to get jobs that way through recommendations. I currently teach at London Metropolitan, and I teach at UAL, actually Central St Martin's, and I teach at University of East London. And they've all come through, people have recommended me for them. So I would also say, in case I forget to say this later, something just really simple is just be on time and be polite and just be super friendly and helpful. Because there's always there's a long queue of people behind you waiting to take whatever job that you've currently got. So if you could just be on time and show up, and I think that kind of showing up thing is something that also carries for networking. Just show up and just be present, even if you're nervous about it. So just be present and talk to people. And I think for me anyway, that's works. Just don't stop and keep talking. That's the key.
I may have forgotten to add this, but I did apply for like hundreds online of applications. I think I may have mentioned this, but the one that got me a job was in person.
Yeah.
So please network, guys, please.
Just coming back to my experience with getting a job. As Rain called out, I suppose it wasn't all luck. It was more like 20% effort and 80% luck. Because I did, they probably wouldn't have hired me if I didn't have gallery job specific skills that I've acquired before even I did my BA through unpaid work, unfortunately. But yeah, so although I wouldn't really want to promote unpaid work as an option for everyone, because of course not everyone can afford to do that, but in my case it did help me out. So if you guys have the time, perhaps during your studies while you're still in education, and if you are either supported by your parents or under a maintenance loan, if you can afford doing some volunteering or perhaps even an unpaid internship, I think that might increase your chances of getting a job as you exit education. Well, at least that's what it was for me.
So what I heard there was 80% effort and 20% luck. I think it is that way round, because I know that one of the things I was going to ask Konstantinos about as well was this, you said at the beginning, or close to the beginning, this idea that you were just determined, yeah? Mm. So there is something about, because that was the question for Karen as well, of that thing of how do you deal with that 97 and say no. It's about pushing through that and not focusing on that bit. And in fact, I think what a lot of people forget is that there's a lot of prep work that you've already done. So if you've done the internship before, if you're doing what Karen says, you're showing up, you're good to your word. When you say you do something, you do it and you follow through. All of those characteristics are all the basis for people to say yes, come and work with us. But I was asking you, Konstantinos, how do you deal with that, keeping that determination? Particularly, and Karen's in this world as well, I think, there's no monetary gain immediately from making your art, but you're actually continuing that.
To be fair, the determination might come up to the employers or to the galleries as annoying. It can be annoying for them, but it shouldn't stop you. But when you have a goal, you can slowly see different opportunities, and you can see them far away. They can be quite far, but you just need to keep going so you approach them. And then once you approach them, you can slowly grab one, and one opportunity might lead to another. Yeah, would you like to talk to you a little bit more about my about the hiring process?
Yeah,
of my current job.
Yeah.
So this is it can be a little bit of a funny question because as self-employed, if most of you will become practicing artists, so the most important thing is to find a good accountant. After that, to be honest, it's just keep working and experimenting and working as many hours at the studio, and of course, for those who will also have a second job on the side, like myself, what I teach in 2 schools, I had to quite be annoying during the application process. I sent loads of applications, most of which were not answered. But then I had a few answers from a couple of schools, so I was able to work for 2 of them currently. But really, it's all about being persistent. Like to persist. If you don't persist, they will not get back to you. And a lot of rejections, but there will be a few.
Yeah.
That will,
I think that's kind of the message that I'm hearing everybody. But, I don't know how you find that resilience, because that's the other word that we talk about. You've got to keep bouncing back. I don't know if Karen, you poised to say something.
Well, you have to pay the rent, so you've got to find the resilience to
Good motivator.
Yeah, exactly. But it's really interesting thinking about 20%, 80%, and I'm also thinking about the studio work that I make and how maybe the same ratio is. Same ratio, I'm not sure, because I think there's lots of myths about being an artist for people who are not artists, looking in on us. I think that they think that we go to the studio and everything we make is 100% ready and off it goes out into the world, when actually we're experimenting so much and failing so much, and I think failure is a big part of being an artist, and I think it's something that it's a really positive thing to embrace. So I would say that when I'm making my work, I would say that maybe, I don't know, gosh, I'm hesitant to put a figure on it, maybe like 60% failures and 40% are actual successes in the studio. And the same thing happens in when you're trying to find a job. I think that it's also really difficult in that way. When everyone is talking, I have all these great thoughts, and then when I get a microphone, my mind just blanks, so I can't remember any of them. I'm full of wisdom, I promise you.
Well, I was going to ask something about those, more pointed questions that we've got here about things like, is there anything that you've done, stuff that you put on your CV that you think that's been really helpful? If there's any kind of advice about opportunities that you've seen, and I know we've talked a lot about networking. I think it's quite hard. Let's stick with those, because that last one is about how to navigate your careers. And, that's a bit of a big question, really. But I'm wondering about, things that you've done that feel that you've given you a bit of an edge. I think Follow's already started on that around things like internship software. And then also this idea about, how to find opportunities, tips that you might have that are quite practical. So you've got the mic, Folla.
I would say look for opportunities, like for example Film London. They offer free courses for example, the introduction to animation, which is what I took. They also give bursaries out for independent filmmakers. And I also went on the Black Animator Scheme, and they gave me a commission sum of $3,000 to make an animation. Finding opportunities that offer you money to do a project is one of the perfect ways to go about developing a career outside of education as well. So again, I recommend Film London, Screen Skills, they do courses like every month. They've got like opportunities. I think BBC is actually doing something in Screen Skills, so have a look at that. And having taken those courses, put that on your CV too, just to give you a little edge. Like, I took part in this course. I spoke with this person who may be in the industry, because you're speaking to professionals when you take these courses, and that just gives you a little edge when, if you get an interview and someone asks you, oh, you mentioned I spoke to this person on this course, and can you tell me about your course and what you did? So,
To be honest, CVs I see as a very good tool. You will start preparing yours, or most of you have already one or in the process of making one, especially during the professional practice module, and they will, I'm sure that it will show you exactly how to build it. An important thing about your CV is to try to be as versatile, to include as many things as possible, even a few positions that you may have, or something that you might have, an experience that you may have, may think that it's not very relevant, or employers really like to see that. They really like to see that you've went into many different areas to work for, to gain experience. So CVs are very useful tool, especially for artists, but for artists, the list of exhibitions. So you're going to be having your exhibitions, and you can include everything from your degree show to every single thing that you do, and every exhibition counts, and you should list them for sure. Another useful tool, apart from the CV, I'm sure more will come back to the CV topic, I wanted to say, of course, for artists is another tool is Instagram and website, but mostly Instagram. And it's another tool. Most galleries are searching for artists through Instagram. They're looking at you. They're looking at everything that you do, everything that you post, your studio, how it looks, how you work, who you follow, what you comment, everything. So Instagram is a useful tool. Cards, business cards, and everything like that, I think that you shouldn't invest in one day because they end up in garbage. But maybe some people will have to say more things about the CV.
Yeah, just to reiterate some things that have been mentioned already. Do you guys still do those online courses on Photoshop, After Effects, and stuff like that? I remember you did that when I was on the course.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great opportunity to really. I mean, I remember myself didn't really taking it, fortunately. But I think it is a great opportunity to collect those skills that you can put on your CV, and from either your experience of applying to this gallery job that they later admitted that they hired me because they saw on my CV that I had experience of using a very specific gallery-specific database platform that I've acquired during an unpaid internship that I did earlier on. But I mean that can apply to a variety of different roles with other tools like just Photoshop, After Effects, whatever else that may be, what may be relevant to the jobs that you're applying. So I think, just again to reiterate, I think those skills that you gain, and that may not just include digital skills, that may also include, I don't know, if you work with metal or with wood, definitely put all of those things on your CV. And then another thing while I have the mic, I guess, to just again mention and reiterate about networking and the importance of networking and finding a job. I think, again, from my experience, the best thing that you can do is to really utilize your own networks, whatever they may be, and to really not underestimate them. And I feel again, coming back to my own experience, of course, I didn't anticipate that I'd find my first gallery job through my manager at the coffee shop that I was working at. But it happens. And so, again, that very nicely connects to what Karen mentioned about just like being there, showing up, being on time, being nice to other people, because you never know who this person might know and where those connections might lead you.
But what we're talking about here is then how do we then send that message outwards, outside the studio to the world. And I think it's really interesting to think about CVs and Instagram. But I also wanted to add that it's so simple, but just taking really good photos of your work is something that I learned too late probably. And I would just like take a photo on my phone and that would be it. But taking a good photo of your work means a lot to the people who are receiving these images. So do invest in that, or learn how to do it yourself even. And I was also thinking about statements and trying to write a statement, which you might not, it's not an easy thing to do, and I think that it's good to, if you have one from last year, just refresh it and see if it's changed, and just keep writing your statement so that it becomes something you practice almost like bi-monthly. And then for the CV, I had some thoughts as well, because when I was graduating in my third year, I was like, what CV? I haven't done anything. How do I make this CV out of nothing? And some of you might be thinking that now, like, how do I manifest this emptiness into a CV? But I think that you were saying, Constantine, with that, you can use, I think someone else mentioned it as well, that you could just use things that you don't think are relevant, but add them in, as long as they are related in some way. So a wood workshop, or you curated a show with your neighbour and their cat, or whatever, and you just embellish things, and the CV will start to build up, and then you can start editing it as you build up on that CV. But just start with anything, because I know that's quite a nervous, it's a difficult thing to do. And then Insta, as she mentioned as well, is also something that I think you could do a whole talk on Instagram, because I think that people feel very differently about it. But I personally have found it really, really useful. I think that it's important to, again, how are you presenting yourself outwards to the public, and I think that Instagram is part of that outwards presentation, as well as your CV and your statement and your documentation and your website if you have one. How are you presenting yourself? So I think that every now and then you can put up an image of your cat, so the cat's an example again. But I think that it should mostly be telling, well, this is what I do, so I sometimes put up exhibitions and experiments in the studio and people that I've met and exhibitions I've seen, so that I kind of curate Instagram in a way that this is what I'm doing. And I think that's a tricky thing to do, and I still struggle with every single post, like, is this the right post to put up? Every single time I press post, it's quite a tricky thing. But maybe that's like a workshop for another day, because I think Instagram is a really interesting tool.
I think for me, what you're getting your head around is this idea that everybody has an Instagram account, and that's your own personal Instagram account. It's for your friends and your family and anybody else. But what you're talking about is really directing it. You know, and if you're a named limited business, then you have your Instagram account, and it's not you, but of course as an artist, you've got your name on it. So, and all of you have looked at artists' Instagrams, and you will see how they're being quite deliberate about how they're using it, as Karen's talking about. And that, I think, comes into play. There's also that thing that we can say about anything that's online, is that once it's online, it stays online, and anybody can find that. So what you put in there, how you comment, actually, is quite, there's a history, and that will stay there. So those considerations are important. You were going to say something?
I was just going to say that as you continue further and further into your art career, most of the things you do will be art related anyway, so they would all be relevant on an Instagram feed.
Yeah, well, it might be that you're going to a gallery somewhere, and you want to put something up, and then it just naturally just goes in. But I still think a curated cats exhibition sounds like it's worthy of both a CV reference and an Instagram reference. I would take
If you're
that.
curating it, then it's part of your art
Well,
practice.
it's even better if the cats are curating it. Try and pull that one. Yeah. think that
That's
sounds
a
like
lot to
that's
do.
another project that you do. That sounds really good. So that, I mean, I think we can. It would be quite nice to round off because we've got about half an hour for questions, and there are a few more questions, but some of it's already there. You know, you've spoken about networking. I mean, you've pointed out this person that you're just chatting with could be the person that gets you there. I think before we started as well, we were talking about saying yes to things rather than no. It's very, I mean, does anybody want to talk about that? I mean, this comes back to this kind of attitude process of thinking about, well, how do I build that resilience in? But how do you say yes to things when you don't really know if you want to?
I'll speak just very quickly on that. I think when you're first starting out, you say yes to everything and you just try it. And I think that the internships that you may get, if you're lucky, I'm not sure if now they're much shorter than they were when I was doing. I don't think people are allowed to employ you for a long period of time without paying, so they might be slightly shorter now. What was I saying? Say yes, say yes, say yes.
Saying yes at the beginning.
I'm thinking about internships now. I'm going on. But as your career progresses, you also have to learn to say no, actually. And that's a difficult thing to do. And very fortunate thing to be able to do.
Yeah, but this comes back to something that you said when you were working in the city.
Yeah.
And we obviously think you must have been out of millions because you worked in the
millions.
city. But there comes a point where you made a very direct decision to say no to that. But what you're then doing is saying yes to something else. And I think that's kind of something about that vital shift, isn't it? That, you know, it's not just that you're saying no in an uninformed way. It's because you recognise that's not what I need, but I need this. So you become clear about that direction. Would that be true?
I think I was young and brave back then, and I'm not sure I would make the same decision now. I'd like to think I would, but I think youth brings with you a certain braveness, actually, where you can say, you can free fall into the unknown, basically, which is what I do. So I said no to this particular life because it felt wrong. I was miserable. I wasn't earning good money. I was at Deutsche Bank and I was at the London Stock Exchange and I was earning good money, but I was miserable. And I just had to say no and sort of free fell into something else and kept turning up, kept being present, kept being polite and just didn't stop, basically.
And all those things that everybody's spoken about, networking, of who you might meet, that opportunity of somebody who's a manager in the coffee shop that knows someone, all of that comes into play. And I'm also picking up that everyone's spoken about a network of colleagues, collectives, that have at some point had a part to play in, it might be just bolstering your confidence of saying, yeah, just keep going. Or it might be setting up that show or getting that work. It sounds like that's always been part of the play. And just before we finish, I think it's interesting because you've made the other three people on the panel are very much directed within their art practice, surviving, hopefully making a living, making that work. You've got an art practice in the sense that I think it's very interesting you spoke about right at the very beginning, that passion for doing something. And that somehow spoke to me that was something that set you up for somebody to say, oh, you've got this. Oh, that makes you really interesting. And was that kind of what came out of that with the...
Yeah, so basically I had a screening and I showed independent work, so I did a short film, animated film on AI. After that screening, I mentioned that I'm working on a comic with my young sister, and we was just, it's early ideas, but I'd already started drawing and making the characters and designing them, and that's what caught the attention of my boss, because she does stories for children, she does TV series. I mentioned that passion and what I wanted to do, and it aligned with what she's trying to do. She was looking for a development assistant who was interested in storytelling but who can also visualize and design characters. If I hadn't said that, I probably wouldn't have had the job I have now. It's that I was open with what I wanted to do, and I made it clear every single time I was given a mic, or any time someone asked me, so what comes after your short film? You've done this, what do you want to do next? Always be open and tell people directly what you want in life, basically what you want to do. And you will find that someone will be like, oh, this is perfect. Like, you can, obviously, what I'm doing now is I'm working in a company, but at the same time, they give me the tools and the opportunity to develop myself on the side. So I'm still working on my passion project now. It's just, you need to constantly say what you want in life, otherwise you just won't receive it.
I think that's really brilliant kind of point, actually. Karen, did you want to say something about that?
I think that we've been talking quite a lot about jobs that other people can give us. And I think it's also really important to know that we can generate things ourselves. I've done a bunch of curated projects on shoestring budgets, like £100, and just gathering some people together and doing some curation, and writing a press release and making a publication. And I think that you can rely on the outside world to give you these jobs, but you can also generate quite a lot within yourselves. There is power within the community here.
No, I think in a way that's a really nice way to open it up to questions, but that's great to hear from the power comes from the community, but also from yourselves. And as you just pointed out, being open and actually being clear about this is what I do and this is who I am. And then that falls on the ears of the right person. And that opportunity might be a job, or it might be, as you're talking about, Karen, somebody said that's exactly the kind of ideas I'm thinking about for the show that I want to put on.
Let's do it.
And you're already doing it, so let's work with you on that. That's it. It's great. So thank you guys for filling us in. I think that's great. I almost feel like it's so quiet up there. We should give you a round of applause. Now we get to the good bit, which is, because you have all been quiet and writing loads of notes, find out what questions you have, anything you want answering. Where do we come from in terms of that? Fee?
How do you maintain the identity of artist when creating art mightn't be the main thing you're doing at the time? Say while working in a bank or at a gallery or anywhere else. How do you have the confidence to consider yourself like an artist, if that makes sense?
You hold on tight. You hold on tight in the studio, or wherever your studio is, even if it's a table in your bedroom, and you hold on tight to that and you don't let it go. Yeah, and it builds. It'll grow.
And also try to surround yourself with artists and creatives that can inspire you wherever you're working. And I feel like, that's what really helped me, just having those friends from uni and other friends who are interested in arts and doing something creative. That really pushed me to do more creatively, even though I was working on other things and towards other things. And yeah, that really, really helped me.
If you produce artwork, then you are immediately an artist. I know it's hard when you're at different stages and you're going to events where people are professionals already or just looking to make connections, whereas maybe you just started. And that was the case for me on many occasions. I don't know if you know of the CMC, it's a Children's Media Conference, and was with my boss. Everyone was approaching her. No one knew who I was, so they were like, "Oh, Rose, you're romantic. I remember you from BBC." And then they're like, "So who are you?" It's just one of those things where you have to reinstate, "Oh, I do this. I'm an independent filmmaker. I work in animation. I did 2D animation. I'm currently working as a development assistant now under my boss." So you just got to reinstate. Remember, and do it to yourself. Remember that you are a creator, no matter what. You're making work, you are an artist, and you explain yourself to anyone who asks.
Also, I think that it really depends on the job. It's very important to keep practicing your work through the studio, but also choosing a job that, a side job also that may be relevant or close to you. For instance, for me, I'm teaching, and I'm teaching many different ages, but I also have children, and some of my students are very young. So, for example, this is it's a very crucial part of my inspiration. I find it very inspiring. So, this influences my practice to a great extent as well.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
More questions? Just Peggy's got one.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to ask you about your MAs, actually, about, you know, when you did the timing of your MA, what's the sort of, was a good time for you to go and do an MA after university, and how you chose your MA, and also was the MA, was it helpful to you, and what did you get from that, just as something people are interested in doing MAs afterwards?
So I think that applying for an MA straight after may not be suitable for everyone. You may feel that you need some time, and that's totally fine. But for me, I would say that I went straight. I made lots of applications when I was in my last year, and I had interviews. Then COVID came, but I got accepted at the RCA, and I went there. And it was very inspiring for me, and it was good for me to continue with MMA, because then you take your practice and yourselves in an even more intense and professional setting, and you feel a bigger pressure to develop your practice even further. So for some people it's easier to do it immediately after, but some they may choose not to. But I think it's fine for both ways, really.
For me, MA was absolutely essential. It was incredibly helpful, and it allows you just to continue what you've started here and move on to the next level. When you do it, I don't know, that's another question. I think everyone's journey is different. So it took me maybe 6 years after the BA to do mine. But some people do it straight away. They feel like, I'm ready, let's go, and they get a place. So I think everyone's journey is different, but an MA is an excellent thing to do.
I do recommend MA because I applied for a bursary and I was able to pay off some of my course fees were paid off by the people, like the Station Foundation. And so if you do consider an MA, also consider what your university, the university you're applying for, offers in terms of reimbursements and awards. It's very much looked over, but you know, I only applied because my sister was like, you should apply, and that's another thing. Like, just because you see it there, and you tend to think, oh, so many people are applying for it. They're not. They're really not. So, if you do go for an MA, look to see if they have awards and bursaries and apply.
Yeah, and my experience in MA was an opportunity to narrow my path down, whereas my BA was super, super broad and wide, and so it helped me identify what it was that I was interested in, and then an MA was sort of like a consolidation of those interests, and really taking the time to sort of explore them in depth, and and then I feel like now, with the end of my MA approaching, I feel like I do have a much clearer sense of myself as a professional, sort of coming into the workforce. So that's what my MA helped me with. But in terms of timing, my journey towards my MA was very sort of all over the place, because initially I was really set on doing a gap year, but then realized that a gap year in London may not be a very financially viable option. But I did get a job, luckily, but then there were other things in my life, other changes in my life that sort of affected my choice of MA. I initially wanted to do a 2-year MA because I felt that after doing a 3-year BA, I'm really enjoying taking that time. I didn't feel like I would want to speed run through a degree. But then due to other factors, such as my partner moving out of country and us going into long distance, and me thinking about whether I want to stay in the UK, whether I want to stay in London long term, basically my gap year turned into 3 months, and I applied for an MA last minute and started in January. That's why I'm sort of like, it's only been just over a year since I graduated my BA, and I tell people that, yeah, I kind of took some time off, but I did manage to get an MA in the meantime as well. So yeah, it's just I guess what I'm trying to say by that is that it's a very complicated process, and there's so many things that may affect your choice of timing, and that can be finance as well, visa, matters, and just I guess taking all of that into consideration would be quite important in this case.
Something also that I would strongly advise is to visit, if in case you're applying to an MA to a different university, or in a different country, or even at the University of Westminster. Just visit the facilities, for example, the RCA, I visited the Whip Show before I applied, and I had an encounter with work, because then you'll see what comes out of these colleges and these universities, and then you'll have an understanding of whether you are a good fit, and if you really like it, and if you like the college and the course and the work that comes out of that, and you see and you feel that you fit there, then you will have more chances of getting accepted there.
Thank you. I know, Tabitha, you had a question. And also, we've got 2 that are online, so Tabitha, if you ask your question, and then we'll go for
It
that.
might not be very relevant, but it might be a bit of a shot in the dark, but I do want to double check. Do any of you have experience as artists internationally, and what does that look like?
Yeah.
I think not initially. I didn't have initially. Although I'm Greek, I'm from Athens. I didn't really have exhibitions and participate in many things there until much later, until I had a couple of shows here already. So I think that you first distinguish what your base will be, and then you can extend towards a different destination. And I did, last year I participated in a fair in Athens, but I did it through my London gallery, the one that I was working here. So we applied and we took part in Art Athena, which is a fair in Athens. And that was my first, although I'm from Athens, and although I grew up there and I lived there until I was 18, I never had the opportunity to have a real exhibition there. So I suggest that you first explore and identify where your base will, and then extend.
Karen, do you have any reference?
I've done residencies internationally, one in Switzerland, I did one in Bauhaus School, which was really exciting. Sometimes I do self-initiated residencies, I put them on my CV as such, internationally. So I might do a road trip to Marfa, Texas, or Roswell, New Mexico, and that would become part of my research. So that's my kind of international experience.
But what's quite nice about that is that, applying for those residencies, they're actually great opportunities, and that Yeah, Judith, and they're there, and
Yes.
again, saying yes to something, and as Konstantinos was saying, it opens doors to something else.
Yeah.
Working in another country, or even follow conferences, festivals, this sort of thing. I feel that's something you're quite aware of in your life. Yeah.
Yeah, very difficult, but you get, I would say with the conferences, if you were to ever go to, or be in a field that's more, less freelance, more in the sector of the creative industries, going to these festivals and events will basically, if you keep going to them, you will meet these people again. They will become reoccurring. These spaces will become networks because they are often there networking with other people. And also, don't treat it in a way of, it's like an interview, because a lot of times they are very, very down to earth. It's very, and there's a lot of drinking at these events. They drink a lot, which is what I discovered, but it's actually very helpful to go to these events and network.
Thank you. No, it's just talking about those opportunities at conferences. I don't know, Caroline, if you've got anything to say about that.
No, not really. Not yet. I'm
Not
looking
yet.
forward to working internationally. But yeah, not just
Great.
Sorry, I just wanted to quickly add.
Yeah.
Film festivals are international. You don't have to be present for them, so you can put your film in, and it can film in another country. That's currently what I'm doing at the moment with Film London. So I think it was B3 in Frankfurt. I sent off a short film, and obviously it wasn't there to attend, but I think it's screening there. So put your films or anything you have out anyway, even if you can't be there internationally.
Yeah, and I mean, we've got quite a lot of experience with students that have done that. Yuki had fantastic success 2 years ago with her films in the Berlin Film Festival and that sort of thing. So and that's directly out of the degree show. So yeah, anybody that's doing that can think about that process. So we got some questions online.
Bring up one question.
Hold on, let me just do these because
Okay.
let's see if we can answer these.
Cool. Thanks everyone for coming. I'm Hayden, I'm part of the alumni team. We organised this event with Rain and Peggy, thanks to our speakers. So we've got 3 now questions that have come through online anonymously. The first one's a little bit technical, probably not so much for the panel, but I can answer it quickly. It's about what visa options are open to international students after graduation. I mean, I'm not an expert, I work in the alumni team. Basically, I've had a quick look, there is something called a graduate visa route. I would just email our careers team. It's literally careers@westminster.ac.uk, whoever asks that question. There does seem to be a route, so hopefully that answers it a little bit. Then we've got, for applying to master's degrees, how do you all organise your portfolios? So whether that's physical work, photography, documents like evaluations, or even artists' manifestos.
I mean, I think one of the things people can answer that if they want, but from our experience as tutors, the most obvious thing to do is come and show us. All the third years are going to go into a period from around January to March where they're going to be looking at those aspects, in particular creating a portfolio. But if you're doing it now and you've got any queries around that, then talk to any of the staff team and we'll be able to give you some advice. But I don't know if any of you found those processes difficult. What I was picking up about the Masters was that, Follow's perspective, which is like, yeah, they want you. Don't feel scared about applying. You can find the right one for you, as Konstantinos is saying, and Karen was saying. But actually, go for it, and if you need advice, then come and find it. But do you have any advice on that in terms of artist statements or folio, anything that you're putting together? Would you say anything? Karen, I can see you nodding. Caroline?
I was just going to say the same thing that you said, like get your stuff together and show it to your tutors. That's what I was going to say.
I was also going to add formatting is really important. I understand like applying online, they each have their own application process and it can be a nightmare. But having your own website and just having links that anyone can go to is pretty much the go-to if you're applying online. So PDFs, having a website, or just a link that they can go to rather than opening up Word documents and heavy files. Yeah, I recommend that.
Yeah, absolutely, but also just to reiterate what Karen said earlier, good documentation of your work. And that doesn't necessarily always mean photos, especially if you do mixed media stuff. So consider different formats, whether that would be video, sound, and yeah, sort of just explore different options in terms of documenting your work. Maybe even 3D scans if that's the thing, while you're still at uni. Yeah, so I think that's definitely a way to perhaps stand out sometimes with your portfolio.
Thank you.
So there's another one. I think I can combine them because they're quite short. So basically, what does an average day look like for you, and what's the most rewarding part of what you do?
Tough question. What's the average day look like, and what's the most rewarding bit? Go.
So I think the average day for me is, because I work in children's TV, we are constantly refining our pitches. So we're working on 2 TV programs, I think it's one of them is called Barry Loser, which is based on a book series, and another one was made from scratch. And so we basically refine the pitch, so wherever it be assembling assets or a PowerPoint, redesigning a character, that kind of falls to me, and she focuses on the writing. And then like, because I'm also a researcher and I have to come up with my own ideas, I'm also developing stories, and it's rewarding and it's also painful because I will come up with an idea for a series and Ross can easily just figure out all the problems with it, and before I know it, that idea has to be thrown out the window. But it's good experience in understanding research and how the children's TV industry works, and knowing your age, who your audience is as well. So that's kind of the day in the life.
Great, thank you.
We've had a day, an average day would be basically managing different lessons, preparing materials for them, working in the studio, and also managing this balance between teaching and art making, basically. So it's all about the balance.
It's about balance, and for me about the juggling as well, actually. So there's quite a lot of juggling every single day. So I'm teaching, I'm emailing many people at once and working out seminars and lectures and enjoying that and meeting students. And if I'm in the studio, I'm juggling making the work and failing the work and documenting the work and emailing people about the work and tidying the studio and paying the rent. And it's a real juggling thing, and I think that the reward is that you can do it. I think that we're all here today because we're incredibly fortunate to be here today, studying art in a time like this. And I think it's such an amazing thing to be able to do. So just to be able to continue doing it and know how difficult it is the reward for me.
It would be hard to condense it all to one day because my week is quite very sort of like segmented into like different, I don't know, just like putting on different hats on different days of different parts of the week. So I study 3 days a week, I work 2 days a week, and then the rest is sort of this gray zone of rest, housework, and all of the rest, which includes, I would say, the most exciting and rewarding parts, which is self-initiated projects, working with the collective that I mentioned already, doing the craziest stuff, experimenting, that sometimes involves just taking a walk and chatting. Other times it involves visiting my friend at her studio and seeing what she does. And then other times, it involves organizing some last minute things. So we're meeting with Anissa this Friday to talk about a last minute one-day exhibition type of idea that we have for next Monday. We don't know how it's going to look like. We know that there's a space in our studio. We know that there are some people interested, and we're just planning to come together on Monday and see what happens. Produce an exhibition in one day. I'd say like these moments are the most rewarding ones when you're just with like-minded people working on the things that you're most passionate about. Without, and of course I would like to spend all of my time doing that, but I know that I wouldn't be able to do that without the studies and without the work that supports all that I do. So it's sort of all over the place.
I mean, all of you have actually just described totally engaging life. That's what it is. It's what you've made for yourselves. With some housework. Nobody said a cigarette and a glass of wine as a reward. Very good. So shall we, I'm looking at the time, but I think W, you had a question, so let's...
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious, like if money was no object, what would you do? Like, what's the dream?
Say that again.
If money was no object,
Yeah.
what would you do? What kind of job would you do? Or do you think like you're living your dream right now?
What a lovely question. I think,
Karen, would you like to
oh sure, thank you. I think that's a really nice question. I love thinking about that question actually. I would do exactly what I'm doing, but with more time in the studio. Yeah, exactly as I'm doing it, but with more time, because I do love teaching. But I would like more time in the studio, so yeah, that's a lovely question.
Don't believe me. Exactly the same.
Yeah. Well, because I'm, like I've mentioned, I have a passion project. I'm writing a comic with my sister, and I definitely want to eventually be freelance with it. I also really love learning about the creative industries and developing, so I think it's more of a journey. I really do love where I am right now, and I am very kind of content with where I am. But it's gaining the experience from the creative industries to funnel and fuel the passion projects, and knowing how the industry works, how things are distributed and commissioned, really just getting into the background of it all, I think will help my career, and eventually help the idea of working on a comic and knowing what I need to do in order to get it out there. So yeah.
So sorry, I have to rush off.
I know,
It's really nice.
sorry we won't get to see you at the end, but thank you, Karen.
Thank you
That's
so
really
much.
good.
It's a very difficult question, but I suppose it would probably be just working on those like passion projects and spending more time doing that. So I guess in many ways just the same answers. Yeah.
Thank you. So before we break, and Anna, you had a question, and you had your hand up, and I didn't see it earlier, sorry.
I guess my question is, because I'm an international student, I feel like alone in the UK, and I feel like I struggle a bit with making connections. So how do you go about it with making connections?
I think that's really good for Carolina and Konstantinos in terms of your experience of that feeling isolated.
To be honest, it can be a bit scary when you come into a foreign country to study and to build a life of your own. So I would suggest that you're open-minded really, and you get out of your comfort zone and to explore different people, different cultures, different things really from what you are accustomed to do. Of course, your instinct will tell you to stick with your people and to find people that you share the same culture and to do the same things. But really, it can be a bit dull at the end of the day because you came somewhere else, so you need to embrace this experience and to try different things. So I think that's very important. And I was a bit late doing so, but I did. It took me a while.
What's nice about London is that it is such an international city. So I feel like in that sense, there's so many people who are in this exact situation as well, who are coming from different countries and who are struggling to make connections. So I think just tapping into those communities, and that can be done through a variety of ways. I think just like in the context of the creative industries and being an artist, just visiting exhibitions and really just pushing yourself out there. It doesn't have to even be exhibitions, it can be any types of events. I think that's the best way to meet people. But then I wouldn't underestimate your communities, sort of the communities of people, your own culture, because it really, really helped me sort of find my place in London as a Lithuanian who's living in London, and sort of knowing that I have quite a few Lithuanian friends who come from the exact same sort of context and background as I do, came to study here, or going through the exact same sort of like, I don't know, facing the same cultural perhaps like issues or various nuances of living in the UK. I think that was very, very reassuring, having those people and like just meeting them once in a while, chatting. So I would say it's a combination of that. Like, of course, just sticking to people from your own culture wouldn't necessarily like fulfill the potential of being in such an international metropolitan city, but I think having your own communities definitely reassures. So I think it's just like balancing between those two. But best of luck. And you're not alone.
So I think that's brilliant, and thanks for that final question, Alana. We will clap. It's been so brilliant. Sorry, it's such a shame Karen had to go, so just at that end point, because her contribution's been amazing, but the three of you have given us so much in terms of your advice. We've really wrung you out dry with questions, and you've given us such a diverse range of experiences from where you've come from and what you're doing now. I know all of that's going to be useful for you. We do have some moments to network. I just want to give you a few heads up. There is a £20 Amazon voucher for the people who take part in the survey. So there is a survey there. We'd like you to complete it, and that will go to somebody that's involved in that. I think there's moments at the end now that if people didn't feel they could ask a question but want to ask something now, we've got a few minutes to talk. But in the meantime, I think another round of applause and say thank you very much.